There is a moment after you go silent when everything you expected to feel does not arrive. You thought you would feel relief. Instead, you feel something closer to withdrawal. You keep checking your phone. You rehearse conversations that will never happen. You imagine what they are doing, what they are thinking, whether they even noticed you stopped reaching out at all. And here is the truth that almost no one tells you at the beginning. Your silence is not powerful because it makes them suffer. Your silence is powerful because it removes something they may have quietly depended on without either of you naming it. It removes your reaction. It removes your attention. It removes the predictable emotional response that kept a certain pattern alive. When you stop participating, the entire machinery of that dynamic loses the one part it could always count on, which was you. That is what this is really about. Not revenge, not making them regret anything. Something far more important than that. So, before we go deeper into what can happen psychologically after the cycle loses your participation, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Not because I want a number to go up, but because the work of understanding these patterns takes time, and having grounded, careful information returned to you consistently can be part of how you stay steady when the pull to go back gets strong. This channel exists to walk with you through that calmly and honestly. Now, let us talk about what actually shifts when you stop responding, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending your version of reality, when you stop chasing closure, and when you stop seeking the validation that always seemed to arrive right before it was taken away again. Relationships marked by emotional manipulation often run on a kind of choreography. One person acts, the other reacts, and the cycle repeats in a rhythm that becomes strangely familiar even when it hurts. Your responses were not just responses, they were fuel. They were confirmation that the pattern still worked, that you were still reachable, still movable, still emotionally available to be pulled back in. So when that access disappears, something can destabilize. Not always in dramatic ways, and not always visibly. A person who relies heavily on external validation and control may experience the sudden loss of a familiar source of both as a kind of disruption. But I want to be careful here, because this is where a lot of internet psychology goes wrong. The disruption is not proof that they are secretly obsessed with you. It is not evidence that they are lying awake, tormented by your absence. It simply means a pattern that used to function no longer functions the same way, and human beings, all of us, tend to react when a reliable pattern breaks. This is why the narcissistic person may at first appear completely indifferent. They may act as though your silence means nothing. They may seem unbothered, even relieved, even cheerful. And this is one of the most confusing parts of the entire experience, because that apparent indifference can feel like a final rejection, like proof that you never mattered. But apparent indifference does not reliably tell you what is happening inside another person. Indifference can be genuine. It can also be a performance. It can be a way of protecting an image, of avoiding the discomfort of feeling affected, of maintaining a sense of control by appearing untouchable. You often cannot know which it is, and that uncertainty is precisely the thing you have to learn to sit with, because chasing certainty about their inner world is one of the ways the cycle keeps its hold on you. In some cases, the indifference does not last. What can follow is a range of behaviors that many survivors recognize. There may be a testing of boundaries, a small message that seems casual but is designed to see if the door is still open. There may be renewed charm, a sudden return of the warmth that first drew you in. There may be guilt-inducing messages that reframe you as cruel or unfair for stepping away. There may be accusations, anger, or an attempt to rewrite the story so that you become the one who did harm. There may be sudden affection or promises of change. There may be triangulation, where someone else is brought into the picture to make you feel replaceable or to provoke a reaction. And there may be an attempt to simply restart the old dynamic as if nothing happened. I want to be very clear that none of these reactions are guaranteed. Individual behavior varies enormously. Some people step away and never hear from the other person again. Some experience escalation. Some experience nothing at all. There is no universal script, and anyone who promises you exactly what will happen is selling you certainty that does not exist. What matters is that you understand the range so that if something does happen, you are not caught off guard. And you are not tricked into believing that a familiar tactic is a genuine transformation. Because that distinction is everything. There is a real difference between genuine accountability and an attempt to restore control. Genuine accountability tends to be quiet. It does not demand access to you. It does not come with conditions. It respects your boundary, even when the boundary is painful to the other person. It does not require you to abandon your own experience in order to soothe theirs. An attempt to restore control, on the other hand, often centers on regaining access. It focuses on how your distance affects them. It may include apology, but the apology functions as a key to reopen a door rather than as a recognition of your right to close it. Learning to feel the difference in your body is part of what protects you. Now, here is why this is so hard, and why intelligent, self-aware people find themselves struggling to stay silent even when they know the relationship was unhealthy. It has to do with something called intermittent reinforcement. When reward is unpredictable, when affection and approval arrive inconsistently rather than reliably, the human mind does not lose interest. It becomes more fixated. The uncertainty itself becomes compelling. If you have ever wondered why you could not simply walk away from someone who hurt you, this is a large part of the answer. You were not weak. You were responding to one of the most powerful conditioning patterns that exists, the same pattern that makes unpredictable rewards so difficult to step away from in every area of human life. This is the foundation of what many people call a trauma bond. Inconsistent reward mixed with emotional uncertainty can create an attachment that feels far more intense than a stable, kind relationship ever did. The highs felt higher precisely because the lows were so low. Your relief when the tension broke felt like love because it arrived after fear. And so when you go silent, you are not only leaving a person, you are leaving a cycle your entire system learned to anticipate. That is why the silence can feel like withdrawal. That is why you may feel anxiety, guilt, doubt, longing, and a strong urge to reach out, even while the rational part of your mind is telling you clearly that going back would hurt you. Let me put the nervous system piece in plain language without overstating anything. When you live in an environment where you cannot predict whether the next interaction will bring warmth or coldness, praise or criticism, your body often stays in a state of heightened alertness. You learn to scan, to anticipate, to prepare. That vigilance can become so normal that its absence feels wrong. So when you finally step into stillness, the stillness itself can register as unsafe, even though it is the safest place you have been in a long time. This is not a medical diagnosis, and I am not making clinical claims about you specifically. I am describing a pattern that many people recognize so that when you feel that discomfort, you understand it is not a sign you made the wrong choice. And this leads to the single most important reframe in this entire conversation. Your silence was never really about changing them. It was about changing your participation in the cycle. That is the shift that changes everything, and it is worth pausing on before we continue. If this way of thinking is helping you make sense of your own experience, this is the moment to subscribe if you have not already. This channel is not here to feed you outrage or to promise you that someone will get what they deserve. It is here to offer grounded education about emotional manipulation, boundaries, recovery, self-worth, and the slow, real work of rebuilding after an unhealthy relationship. If that is the kind of steady company you want as you heal, staying connected here is one small way to keep that support within reach. Now let us go deeper, because the most important part is still ahead. Here is what I need you to sit with. The real turning point in your healing is not the moment the narcissistic person finally reacts. It is not the day they message you, or the day they seem to fall apart, or the day you hear that they are struggling without you. Many people wait for that day as if it will be the moment they are finally free. But that day, even if it comes, does not free you. Because as long as you are waiting for it, your attention is still tethered to the same person you are trying to detach from. The real turning point is quieter and far more powerful. It is the moment you stop measuring your healing by their reaction at all. Think about what it means to wait for someone to miss you, to regret losing you, to feel jealous, to suffer, or to come back. Every one of those wishes keeps a thread running from your mind to theirs. Every one of them makes your peace conditional on their internal state, which is the very thing you can never control and never truly know. You left to reclaim your life, but if your life is spent monitoring theirs, you have not actually left. You have simply changed the distance. Genuine freedom begins when the central question in your mind quietly changes. It stops being, "What are they feeling about me?" and it becomes, "What do I actually need for myself?" This matters so much because of what these relationships often do to a person's sense of identity. When you spend a long time in an environment shaped by another person's unpredictable moods, you can slowly lose contact with your own emotional reality. You become an expert reader of someone else. You learn their tone, their timing, the subtle shifts that signal a coming storm. And in learning them so completely, you can stop knowing yourself. You may reach a point where you no longer trust your own perceptions, where you check their face before you know how you feel, where your inner world becomes a mirror of theirs rather than a home of its own. Going silent is often the first time in a long time that you get to hear your own voice again. And at first, that voice may be faint because it has not been allowed to speak freely for a long time. This is why your silence, when you understand it correctly, is not a weapon at all. It is a boundary. A weapon is aimed at hurting another person. A boundary is built to protect yourself. The difference is not in the action, but in the intention behind it. If your silence is a strategy to make them feel your absence, then you are still playing inside the old game, still trying to influence their emotions, still handing them power over your sense of resolution. But if your silence is simply the space you need in order to stop being harmed, then it belongs entirely to you, and no reaction from them can add to it or take it away. That is also why no contact is not about winning. There is no scoreboard. There is no victory to be claimed by outlasting someone or by appearing to move on faster. Framing it as a competition keeps you emotionally entangled because a competition requires an opponent, and an opponent requires ongoing attention. The goal was never to defeat them. The goal was never even to make them understand what they did. You may want that understanding badly, and that longing is human, but waiting for someone to comprehend your pain can become another way of staying stuck. Some people will never understand or will refuse to. The goal is simply to stop participating in a pattern that was destructive to you. That is a goal you can actually reach entirely on your own without their cooperation. I do want to speak honestly about safety because not every situation is emotionally difficult in the same way, and some are genuinely dangerous. In some cases, going silent may provoke escalation or retaliation rather than a quiet fading away. If you have any sense that stepping back could put your physical safety, your finances, your housing, your job, or your children at risk, please treat that seriously. Silence is a boundary, but boundaries sometimes need support around them. Reaching out to people you trust, seeking guidance from professionals who understand these dynamics, and making a practical plan are not signs of weakness or overreaction. They are wise. You do not have to navigate the riskier parts of this alone, and there is no honor in refusing help. For most people, though, the difficulty of silence is not physical. It is the slow, strange emptiness that follows the removal of a relationship that trained you to constantly react. That emptiness can feel like loss, and in a sense it is, because you are losing a pattern your whole system organized itself around. But I want you to understand what that emptiness can eventually become. When your mind and your body finally stop revolving around unpredictable emotional cycles, the emptiness begins to change texture. It becomes spaciousness. It becomes quiet. it becomes the first real peace you may have felt in a very long time. The absence of chaos is not the same as the absence of meaning, even though at first it can be mistaken for it. And this is where healing reveals its true shape. Healing is not proving that the narcissistic person lost something valuable when they lost you. You may, in fact, be deeply valuable, but making your recovery depend on their recognition of that value simply hands them the role of judge over your worth. That is the very dynamic you are trying to leave. Real healing is something else entirely. It is the moment you recognize that you do not need them to recognize your value at all. Your worth was never theirs to grant, and it is not theirs to confirm now. It exists whether they ever acknowledge it or not, and it existed the whole time you were waiting for them to see it. So let us return to where we began, to that moment after you go silent, when everything you expected to feel does not arrive. Now you can understand why. The relief did not come immediately, because relief is not the first thing you feel when you leave a pattern your body memorized. But something else was beginning underneath the discomfort, something you could not see yet. Your attention, which had been given away for so long, was slowly returning to you. Your identity, which had been shaped around another person, was beginning to take its own form again. Your boundaries, which had been repeatedly overwritten, were finally holding. Your capacity for peace, which had been buried under constant vigilance, was starting to surface. That is the real story of the narcissist cycle after you go silent. The most important thing that happens does not happen inside their mind. You may never know what happens there, and the surprising truth is that it matters far less than you once believed. The most important thing happens inside your own life. It happens in the quiet mornings when you no longer wake up bracing for someone else's mood. It happens when you make a decision based on what you want rather than on how they might react. It happens when you notice that hours, then days, have passed without their voice living inside your head. That is where your life begins again, and it begins the moment you stop asking them to hand it back to you and simply take it for yourself. If this reached something real in you, stay with this channel. Subscribe, not as a favor to me, but as a small commitment to the version of yourself that is quietly returning. Healing is not one decision. It is many small choices repeated until they become who you are, and surrounding yourself with grounded, compassionate understanding makes those choices easier to keep. You reclaimed your silence. Now reclaim everything that silence was protecting: your attention, your identity, your boundaries, your peace, your self-respect. They were always yours. They still are.